Welcome to English Podcast Table, your go-to space for learning, growing, and connecting through the power of English conversations. If you find this podcast helpful, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Your support means a lot and helps us reach more learners like you. Pull up a chair, and let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into the mechanics behind, well, those really big personal transformations. Our mission. To give you some practical insights you can actually use. You see some people just completely turn their lives around. They achieve things that looked honestly impossible. And then others seem kind of stuck in the same place year after year. So what's the secret? Are they just lucky, or are they doing something fundamentally different?
Yeah, it's fascinating. When we really looked into this, what stands out is that these huge transformations, they rarely happen overnight. It's almost never one big, dramatic decision. The real secret, if you want to call it that, it's more about the little things, the consistent changes we make every single day. That's where the magic seems to happen.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. It shifts things, doesn't it? Away from needing some massive leap to something, well, a bit more manageable. Like, think about learning a language, right? At first, it just feels impossible. There's many words, all these rules. But mastery doesn't come from, swallowing a dictionary whole. It's about building habits day by day, changing how you think about it, and actually, using the language, little bits, consistently. So, okay, if the path is these small, consistent steps, why is it so hard? Why do so many people struggle to even start or keep going, even when change sounds, well, pretty good?
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Our research points to a few common psychological traps. A really big one is just fear of failure. People get totally paralyzed. They ask, okay, but what if I try this and I fail? What if it's even worse?
Yeah, that thought can stop you cold.
But, the important flip side to consider is, what if you try and actually succeed? Think about it. Every single successful person has failed, probably multiple times. The difference wasn't not failing. It was not letting that failure be the end of the story. They kept going.
And tied into that, I guess, is often just not knowing where to begin, a lack of direction.
Exactly. It's not always a lack of desire for something better. It's feeling completely swamped by the how. People get stuck thinking they need this perfect, foolproof plan before they can even take step one.
Right. Analysis paralysis.
Precisely. And then there's that inner voice, right? That negative self-talk. I'll never be good enough for that, or I'm just not the kind of person who...
Ugh, yeah, that internal critic.
It can be brutal. Those thoughts act like mental roadblocks. They stop you before you even put the car in gear. Yeah. And maybe the most common trap we saw, waiting for motivation to strike. You hear it all the time. I'll start, when I feel inspired or when I feel ready.
Oh, I know that one.
But here's where it gets really interesting, looking at the science of habits. Motivation. It usually comes after you start taking action, not before. Action fuels motivation, not the other way around.
That really hits home for me. I remember waiting, forever for the perfect moment or that burst of inspiration for certain things, and it never showed up. The moment only really arrived when I finally just kind of forced myself to take that first uncomfortable step. And then, the motivation started kicking in.
Exactly that. So the big picture here, the main takeaway from this bit, understanding what's actually holding you back, naming those fears, those habits, that's the critical first step. You have to see the barrier before you can dismantle it.
Okay, so once you've kind of identified those barriers, the fear, the negativity, waiting for motivation, you can start to work on them. And what our deep dive kept pointing towards is, it's the power of small daily improvements, not giant leaps.
Have you come across the 1% rule? It sounds kind of simple, but it's actually profound. The core idea is if you just get 1% better each day at something.
Just 1%.
Yeah, just 1%. Over a year, that compounds to being roughly 37 times better.
Wow. 37 times.
Exactly. What's fascinating isn't just the math, though. It's how these tiny, almost unnoticeable daily efforts stack up. They build on each other like compound interest, right? Leading to these big results that seem to come out of nowhere, but really they've been building all along.
And that ties directly into habits, doesn't it? Like what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. How these really tiny changes, done consistently, don't just change what you do. They actually start to change who you are. Your identity shifts.
Absolutely. It becomes part of you.
And we're talking about super simple things here, right? Like maybe reading for just 10 minutes a day. or practicing some new skill for like 5 minutes, seriously, just 5 minutes. Or even just noticing one negative thought and consciously flipping it to something positive. Tiny actions.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one story from the sources about someone who became fluent in English, and their method wasn't some intense, crazy study plan. It was just listening to English podcasts every day on their commute, consistently.
Just listening.
Just listening day in, day out, small, consistent steps, no massive overhaul. And it really raises an important question, doesn't it, about how we tend to overcomplicate things. We aim for perfection instead of just focusing on the process, on that small daily action.
That's so true. We want the endpoint without embracing the messy middle.
Yeah.
Okay, so action is key. Small, consistent action. But there's something even deeper, right? Something more fundamental that came up again and again, your mindset.
Oh, absolutely. This is huge. It often boils down to the difference between what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Right. Explain that a bit.
Well, a growth mindset is basically the belief that, hey, I can improve. My abilities aren't set in stone. I can develop them through effort and learning.
Okay, so challenges are opportunities to get better.
Exactly. Whereas a fixed mindset says, look, I'm either good at this stuff or I'm not. My talent, my intelligence, they're fixed traits.
So if you fail, it means you're just not good enough. End of story.
Right. And you can see how one fosters resilience, learning, bouncing back, while the other leads to, well, avoiding challenges, fearing failure, feeling stuck. The implications are massive.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at how our brains are actually wired.
Yeah.
This thing called the reticular activating system, the RAS.
Yes, the RAS. Think of it like a filter or a gatekeeper for your attention. It decides what information from your environment gets through to your conscious awareness.
So it filters out the noise.
Kind of, yeah. But what's really fascinating, and what the research highlights, is how it filters. If you constantly feed it thoughts like, I can't do this, or I'm always messing up, guess what? Your RAS will actively look for evidence to prove you right. It'll highlight every mistake, every setback.
Oh, wow. So you literally train it to see the negative.
You do. But the flip side is also true. If you consciously tell yourself, okay, I'm learning, I'm getting better each day, I can figure this out, your RAS starts to actively scan for proof of that. It notices the small wins, the resources, the opportunities you might have missed before.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, you can actually reprogram your brain's focus.
That's the powerful insight. You have agency here. You can actively train your brain's filtering system.
And how do you do that, practically speaking?
Well, through simple but really powerful practices, things like affirmations, visualization, and gratitude.
Okay, so let's break those down quickly. Affirmations.
Right. Positive self-talk, saying things like, I am capable or I am improving every day. It's not just, wishful thinking. It literally starts rewiring those neural pathways, changing your internal story.
And visualization. Seeing yourself succeed.
Yeah, it's more than just daydreaming. When you vividly imagine achieving your goal, your brain chemistry actually changes. It starts to believe it's possible, even likely. It sort of pre-paves the way.
Okay. And gratitude, how does that fit in?
Gratitude is incredibly powerful. It shifts your focus. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong or what you lack, the obstacles, you start noticing what's right, what you do have, the opportunities. It fundamentally changes your perspective from scarcity to abundance, which fuels positive action.
Okay, this is all really good stuff. Action, mindset. But there's another trap, isn't there? Something else that came up a lot, this idea of waiting. Waiting for the perfect time to start anything.
Oh, yeah. The I'll start when syndrome. When things calm down, when I have more time, when I feel totally ready.
Right, the perfect moment fallacy.
Exactly. But here's the empowering truth that really emerged from looking at successful transformations. You will never feel 100% ready, ever.
Uh-huh. Yeah, probably true.
What's fascinating is that progress actually comes before confidence, most of the time. You take a small action, maybe it goes okay, maybe it's clumsy, but you did it. And that small action builds a tiny bit of confidence, which makes the next small action slightly easier, which builds a bit more confidence. It's an upward spiral, fueled by doing, not waiting. That makes so much sense. It completely flips the script on waiting for confidence first, which is why I absolutely love that saying. Done is better than perfect.
Precisely. It cuts through all the procrastination and perfectionism. So here's a direct challenge maybe for you listening right now. Think of just one thing you've been putting off, and ask yourself, what is the absolute smallest step, like ridiculously small, you could take towards it today? Not tomorrow, today, just one tiny action.
I like that. Make it so small you can't say no.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked action, mindset. Now, speaking of taking action and making changes, something else seems really crucial. Your environment. Have you noticed how much our surroundings actually shape us?
Oh, absolutely. It's massive. And often really underestimated. We're talking about the people you hang out with, right? The stuff you read or watch online, even your physical space. It all subtly nudges your beliefs, your habits, and ultimately where you end up. There's that famous quote you hear attributed to Jim Rohn sometimes. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So what does that actually mean for you, listening? How does that play out?
Well, think about it logically. If you're constantly surrounded by people who are, say, negative or cynical or just kind of stuck themselves, it's incredibly hard work to stay positive and growth-focused yourself. It just drains you.
Yeah, it's like swimming against the current.
Totally. But conversely, if you deliberately spend time with people who are positive, ambitious, supportive, people who are growing themselves,
The energy is contagious.
it really is. Their mindset, their habits, their conversations, it genuinely starts to rub off on you. Almost osmosis, you know? It lifts you up.
So this isn't passive. You have to be intentional about curating your environment.
Exactly. It's an active process.
Like maybe consciously following more inspiring people online, or joining groups or communities online or offline that actually align with where you want to go.
Absolutely. And also actively limiting the negative inputs, meaning maybe spending less time with genuinely toxic people, if possible, or consciously cutting back on, say, doom scrolling or consuming media that just leaves you feeling drained or angry. Be selective.
Protect your headspace.
Protect your headspace. Exactly. I remember another example from the sources. Someone really struggling with their English learning, felt totally stuck, had all the apps, books, everything, no real progress. But then they joined an active online community just for English learners and speakers.
So they found their people.
Yeah. Suddenly they had folks to practice with, to ask questions, share little wins, get encouragement, and connecting that to the bigger picture, that shift in environment was the catalyst. It made all the difference for them. It wasn't just about the learning material anymore.
That's a powerful point.
Yeah.
So it prompts a good reflection question for everyone listening. Who are your 5, your 5 closest influences right now? Think about them honestly. Are they overall lifting you up, helping you grow? Or are they maybe subtly holding you back?
And it's not necessarily about, cutting people off entirely. Sometimes it is, but often it's just about adjusting the balance.
Right. Consciously spending more time with the positive influence, less with the draining ones.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Realizing you have that choice. The power of that deliberate curation is remarkable. So, look, if we had to boil this entire deep dive down to one core message, one key takeaway, it's probably this. You have way more control, way more agency over your life's direction than you might think. You really do. It's through those small, consistent changes we talked about. It's about cultivating the right mindset, that growth mindset. And it's about consciously building a supportive environment around you. Those 3 things together, they can truly transform everything.
Yeah. And it's crucial to remember it's not going to happen instantly. It's not magic. Transformation is usually a process. It compounds over time. But every single step you take, every small intentional action, it genuinely brings you closer to that life you envision, step by step. Which leads us to maybe a final thought, a question for you to really sit with after we wrap up here. What one small habit, just one, could you realistically start today? That, if you stuck with it, compounding day after day, would genuinely make you 37 times better in a year. Think about that. What's your 1% move?